titled Intonation, Emotion, and Aesthetic, Fostering Learners' Agency in Academic Writing Course in Indonesia.
Thank you.
Can I use this slide?
Yes, you can go down here.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you all, and I have been so much inspired by all the speakers today, so thank you very much. And in today's presentation, I'm trying to be more reflective on my research. I've just completed the data collection 7 months ago in Indonesia, and the full structure of the data under analysis will have been completed hopefully by the end of next month with my supervisors. So this is actually the most challenging research I have undertaken in my life. It cost a life because I almost died. I was hospitalized for 3 weeks after getting an attack from a dengue mosquito in Indonesia. So what I'm doing here is actually an extension from Hanum's research, Wahid's research, and Nami's research, and of course from the study that has also been completed by Anna and Professor Andrew Line. So, why agency is the priority? Well, since 2012, 14, 15, we have the mandate of using the concept of learner-centeredness, and then let's forget the idea of teacher-centeredness. Let's shift into learner-centeredness. That's what the government said. Let's use technology, but the question is, how do we do that? Since I have been very passionate about academic writing, then this is probably very much properly formulated. What is expected by the government is the higher order thinking skill should reflect the capacity to engage in a more reflective inquiry with my students, so they could communicate in oral and also in written publications. And I believe that the purpose of teaching academic writing should facilitate this kind of thinking. And that is actually missing from our curriculum. And to tell you the truth, I was running the experiment when the curriculum is underdeveloped, the teachers, the lecturers are underqualified, and when most students underperform. So it was totally frustrating. Then, if you ask me, how does it feel to be in a transformative education? Well, I should say it's frustrating at first. Why is it more even frustrating? It's because I'm trying to shift from one tradition to another tradition. Since 2005 to 2015, I was trained as a genre-based pedagogist. In 2015, I still got a training from G. Martin from University of Sydney in the Netherlands about the working mechanisms of genre-based pedagogy and systemic functional linguistics. In early 1990s up to late 2000s, we have sent young scholars to Australia. And when they came back to Indonesia, they gave the fame to this pedagogy. But my question at the time is, since we are now talking about learner-centeredness, what is actually the student's voice? I have been trained in a detailed fashion about long-range description of linguistics. And then my question in 2015 was, who actually reaps the benefits of this pedagogy? Is it the student or the linguist? Maybe the linguist, maybe the teacher. If we talk about learner-centeredness, then we should give more support to the students, not to the linguist. And then there is one particular thing that is actually my biggest concern. In genre-based literacy tradition, as far as I can remember, they divide the spoken and written communication. But in my research, speaking or speech and writing have the same biological mechanism. And then in their tradition, grammar and vocabulary are the main instruments of communication. But in my research, I tell my colleagues with that tradition is that maybe that's not enough, actually. Maybe there are more. Maybe we have to talk about neuroscience of language learning. Maybe we have to talk about rhythm and intonation. Maybe it's now the time for us to talk about learning language as a multi-sensorial experience. Because in completing one single task, our brain will instruct our body to activate all the senses and also all the sensors from tip to toe. So that's what I understand from this new tradition. When I was younger, everybody, I always wanted to be the star in my class. But since I was doing this research, I stopped talking to myself. I don't want to be the star in my class. It is the students who should be the star every day, every week, every month, and every year. But we need probably a new intellectual infrastructure in our department, in our university, that could actually embrace a new kinds of pedagogy. So that's the start of my research. And then, well, it's a long story, everyone, about genre. Actually, I don't have a problem with the concept of the genre, but the problem is how the genre has been taught in this pedagogy. When language is treated as a closed system, then what we are learning is actually the closed system, the system, and we are not learning about ourselves. And this is probably what I'm doing. The professors always told me, Lala, pay attention to the rhythm. There is rhythm in language, there is music in language. And rhythm has been used in ancient healing, using drum. In martial arts, when I was a kid, I learned silat, the traditional martial art in Indonesia. Well, it's the flow like this. But in karate, I learned different kinds of rhythm. Probably I can do like this. Like that. But in judo, if you want to have the ippon, the clear and powerful throw, then you need to execute different kinds of rhythm with your body. And the most important thing that I taught to my students, because my research is actually, well, situated in a global perspective. I'm teaching a new way of approaching academic writing, and also I'm teaching the students who will be the new English teachers in the future. So I'm telling my students that your motion, your body movement, is an integral part of your cognitive development. It has not been actually addressed in the curriculum by the government. So the problems of low publications of English is there, and then we also have to expand the literacy experiences of students, including in academic writing. We also have the problem in the qualifications of teachers in Indonesia and all teaching methods. Do we actually need those teaching methods? Because my friend in Indonesia have been doctrinated about the powerful teaching methods that might work in our schools, but they don't actually work. And then no investigative curricula, and finally low-level requirements that are being placed on Indonesian students. So I think, in my perspective, it is time for me to further the inquiry skills of my students using the tools, and then breaking away from the linguistic paradigms, and then maybe I could focus on the learning process itself, And finally, using innovative pedagogic tools. Intonation has been neglected as the organic and intuitive way of learning, also emotions and also aesthetics taken from neurological perspective of aesthetics from a genre. And then we propose some solutions. Maybe those low qualifications of English teachers can be enhanced by using technology, but with some requirements. All teaching methods, investigative scholars, and low-level requirements, maybe I could address all of this in my research. And then why agency? I think without agency we cannot talk about long life learning, everyone. We have to make sure that our student is showing certain kinds of control when learning, and they become independent thinkers when learning. And then there are more evidence that an exploratory model of learning may work in the 21st century learning mechanism. Panksepp and Pearson in psychology and perception studies, they always mention that the most active circuit in the brain is the seeking parent circuit. So as long as we could develop a brain-based pedagogy that could help them develop their thinking, their literacy practices, then they could develop their own pattern. So this is what I'm doing in my research, everyone. I use intonation in the form of Moodle. Aesthetics, intonation, how to interpret the intonational graph from their academic text, and also from emotion. The idea was actually based on multisensorial learning experiences. I forgot to mention one thing to you, that even our bone and muscle are the vital instruments in speech perception. So in verbotonalism, I ask my students to listen to the salient intonation while dancing, while moving in any way they like. And then in aesthetics, they can actually see the intonational graph of their own writing. And in emotions, they could actually develop a new way of generating text structure instead of using the one that is used in genre-based pedagogy. And why intonation should be the first priority? This is actually, this has been neglected for such a long time, everyone. What interests me most, actually, without intonation, we could not actually arrange syntactical and semantic arrangement. That's what I understand. But in Indonesia, I have always been told that, okay, memorize the grammar pattern, memorize all those vocabularies, and you will be a great speaker, you will be a great writer. And maybe that is no longer true. Because long before words and grammar are made out, even little baby could actually produce the persuasive features, intonation, rhythm, since they were in the womb of their mother. So maybe you could actually use that kind of approach in English language teaching in Indonesia. It's a long story. The speech and the intonation, the movement of the body is an integral part of the plasticity of the brain. So this is the example of the Moodle. Sorry I couldn't play this because the website is under construction. But here, in the listening exercises, my students had to listen to the salient intonation first before actually hearing the the real spoken intonation. Okay, one more minute for you. And this is the generic structure that has been used, and the focus, disturbance, dialogue, development, resolution, and moral. And then this is a key principle as well. Emotion is the highest organizing elements of text. So no vocab, no grammar mentioned here. And then by using WinPitch or any other speech technologies, my students were trained how to interpret their international graph. 1 more minute ago, yeah. I think at the end of my presentation, I'm trying to be more reflective because this is a 3-in-1 learning tools that are used in my class. So I made some notes about them. Maybe on fundamentalism, it was relatively easier for them to sit and relax. But at first, the hardest part was actually to think of number of chunks that are heard in the exercises. And then comparing and contrasting one's voice with the sample pronunciation. My supervisor and Reliant is the best model for this one, so we use him for the recording. And then on reading for emotion, creating the second stage of the text was probably the most challenging part. And also the moral, and probably choosing the emotion. What emotion I could actually trigger in this part of text? So that was also hard to accomplish at first. And on aesthetics, because my students didn't learn explicitly about grammar, so probably it was relatively difficult for them to see the connection between intonation and syntactical arrangement relation. And then finally, probably self-investigation on finding the connection between intonation and grammar, yeah, relatively hard. So this is just some example, everyone. So that one is probably more sensible for you, the purple one, while the second one is not that sensible. This is the sample of probably a good pronunciation from one sentence from the experimental group. And can you imagine one student in the control group wrote 103 words in one single sentence? Well, it certainly violates the biological mechanism. It certainly violates the memory mechanism. And I have to breathe, so acquisition and then I ran out of breath. Well, it still happens when my students are not trained about the chunking, about the breathing. So, very interesting. And then I should have shown you some research titles from my students, but I don't think I have much time.
Sorry, it's already.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we have more time for your questions. So by all means, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
I've got a question. Do you think that to get the rhythm, and you probably mentioned this in passing, but perhaps listening to music to set the mood, to set the structure, and maybe even singing what you're writing to get that emotion and structure and into it? Is that what you sort of...
Yes,
it's a bit hard to dance while you're typing.
Yeah. Actually, it was hard for them. But I told them that it is important for them to be more sensitive to speech organization of English. Then maybe if they are familiar with the rhythm, with the movement of pitch and intonation, it will be much easier for them in reorganizing their speech, their thoughts in the form of written composition. But I have to assure you that one single Ph.D. will not be the only answer to expand the literacy practices, because the previous study in China, for example, using fundamentalism, a teacherless classroom even was much more successful than a teacher with a class, because they probably had the authentic learning environment. But in my case, it was actually more difficult to run experiment because we didn't have that authentic technologically enhanced learning environment. So yeah, it's a long story to tell, but the previous study from China, and probably also in Vietnam and Thailand, under the same spirit of research, will give us a clue why intonation could give us some clues about syntactical arrangement and semantic arrangement, and maybe also give clues about discourse arrangement. Thank you very much. Yes?
It's good to know that intonation, emotions, and aesthetics affects academic writing skills of students. I myself is a teacher, and I experienced some special Asian students have problems in writing, especially doing persuasive writing.
Oh, okay.
A lot of problems come from the, I think, the traditional way of teaching.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, have you got any, like, are you going to put something in your writing regarding how to improve academic writing skills?
Okay. The first thing I should remember from the data is that the word improvement itself may vary in terms of shapes, forms, and scale. But in my case, when I ask my students to write, I always position myself as a listener and my students as the author. So the idea about that, teaching English using certain kinds of tools that we adopted from the West, because we keep adopting from the West in Indonesian case, and now I'm in the West to learn another thing. So it is important for me to make sure that you are the author, you know what to do. Your brain will tell you what you actually want to do. Take, for instance, one of my students in this experiment, she wrote the title about the comparison between Vygotsky and Piaget in retrospect. And to tell you the truth, no one has ever written that kind of title in the last 10 years. I worked at that university for almost 10 years, and I looked at the database. No one has ever written that part. And in this experiment, I didn't tell them what to do, this, blah, blah, blah. When I was younger, I always told my students, I was the star in the classroom. I was controlling every single thing happening in the classroom. They were not as creative as what I had expected. But this student who wrote actually a very good paper told me that last semester I was frustrated because my writing teacher my writing teacher were not giving us tools to learn. So maybe in my case, in this early data interpretation stage, we provide tools that could actually help them to think creatively, to think independently. I know there are some risks, right? Because internet might be scarce in Indonesia and then more expensive. And my students were coming from lower economic background, so it's much more challenging. Maybe we'll also devise some personal strategies to be with them. And then in this experiment, I didn't position myself as a teacher. I also learned. Look, this is my recording. This is how I failed. This is how I corrected my pronunciation. Let's do this again. So they know that at certain point that I'm also stupid, but I have to do more and more and more. Let's do this again, everyone. In the lab, I told them, this is my pronunciation, this is my writing. Let's go back, let's go back. That's what you have to do. So when you are trying to be open, reducing the gap that you are the teacher, that they are students, well, it will simply help us to become a better teacher, and they will be the better learner, and they will be the star, not me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. This ends the session. And don't forget, if you have these sticks and you would like to give to the presenter, please, this is the last session so that you can give it to them. And the session ends today, and there will be a closing ceremony at 3:45 at Bumela. So enjoy your weekend, everyone, and have a good day.